Morning, folks. Councilman Rasmussen here, coming to you with my update from our Smyrna Town Council meeting on Monday, August 5th, the first meeting of the month. So we actually had a couple of big items that were large parts of the meeting, long discussion, lots of public comment. I'm going to spend most of the time in this update discussing those. So I'm going to kind of go over some of the other items fairly quickly, and I'm trying to get my update done early this morning because I'm heading out of town with my family for 2 weeks. Well, my kids. My wife gets a vacation from me and our kids for 2 weeks while I take them on our yearly summer road trip. So as far as general updates, it's the summertime in August, so there's not a ton of stuff going on. We'll start to see a lot of back to school things happening, and there's some events around that. If you are not on the town tidbits, get on there. Also on the town website, the event updates. There's lots of things that happen are being posted there. So go and check those out if you want to find out any of those kind of normal updates that are happening. I'm going to skip over most of that stuff for this one. As far as the actual agenda for the meeting, we had a couple of items that I'm going to hit. I'm not going to actually hit everything in the order that we did it because I want to save the big items for the last section of this. So we had a couple of smaller items, things that we needed to do. We did what is the third reading of an ordinance change to update our sewer discharge regulations. I've already mentioned this a few times. For ordinances, we have to vote on them 3 times. This was the third reading, so that ordinance is finalized and it now will go into effect. We had a couple of quick conversations about the council code of conduct and guidelines for posting committee meetings. The council code of conduct, there is something that sort of exists like this. It's very, very basic in the town code, but the mayor has wanted to create a more formal code of conduct that sort of lays out more about how we will operate. We've obviously had some tense conversations and things as part of our council meetings over the last year or so. The code of conduct is pretty standard language, but I think the idea is to just have people revisit it and remember that, we're supposed to be respectful of each other. Remember that, also sort of remind members of the audience and other folks that they're supposed to be respectful of each other and of ourselves and of us. So it's not been formalized yet. It has been shared. The idea is that it will be a topic of conversation in a workshop so we can sort of sit down and talk about it a little bit more before we formally adopt something. And in doing so, it'll then get posted up on the town website. So the guidelines for recording and posting the committee meetings. So part of this is, it becomes tricky. If you watch the council meetings, you know that they're zoomed or recorded and done live on Zoom, and then you can go back and watch those. Committee meetings are a little bit different. They don't have the same requirements, but they do. People do like to see what happened in the committee meetings. We do use Zoom when we do the committee meetings. We typically do them downstairs in our conference room rather than in the council chamber. And it can be sometimes confusing. Not everybody knows how to start up the Zoom, and not all the time are they being recorded so that then they can go ahead and be posted afterwards. The idea is, and all of them are open to the public. So if you get the meeting updates, you're going to get the Zoom link if you'd like to log on to those. So there is better work we can do. We can get more of them posted up rather than just posting up the minutes once those are approved. The staff has created some guidelines, basically like there's a sheet at each one to help walk people through so people can get more comfortable with making sure that those are being recorded. And then once they're completed and we've approved the minutes from them, we have them posted up on the website like other things. So you're going to start to see more of that happen as people begin remembering to record those minutes or those meetings, and then they can post them up and you can come and view them later on. We also had on our agenda a resolution for an annexation. So every once in a while, a piece of property asks to be annexed into the town of Smyrna. Typically, they want to do that when they want to be able to connect to our water, sewer, and electric infrastructure. If your piece of property it makes you more valuable, basically. If your property doesn't have to have a sewer or a septic system, you can have reliable water and sewer, especially for commercial properties. It makes them significantly more valuable. And sometimes the cost of doing the water or a new septic system or something like that is more than what it is to connect to the town. So we have one of these properties. It is a property that is owned by a church up off of Joe Goldsboro Road that has requested to annex into the town. In order to annex into the town, you have to be contiguous with the town, so you can't have a random piece of property surrounded by county land. This is in Newcastle County. It is contiguous. It touches another piece of property that is already in town, so it is their option to annex into town. They have submitted their application to be annexed into town. We now have a formal process that we need to go through. They will need to go to they'll have to have a public meeting. They'll have to go to the planning commission. There's a number of steps that will occur. I think we will see it again on our agenda in a public meeting in the middle of September. I believe it's our September, looking at my calendar, maybe 16th meeting, 17th meeting, something like that. So one more piece of property coming into town. It's good for the town in that it is tax revenue for the town. So the more properties we have, the more taxes we get to collect. It was another piece about the Kent County sewer tax or sewer rate increase. So I think this has been in the news a lot if you're paying attention to it. Kent County has significant cost increases associated with operating their sewer treatment plant. They have been passing those costs on to the people who send them effluent, which was the town of Smyrna is one of those. We were told a year and a half ago that there would be a 30% increase to that rate, and it would be spaced out over 3 years, so 10% a year, essentially, in order to get that rate up where it needs to be. Those estimates did not keep up with what the actual cost increases apparently are for Kent County, so they passed on to us, and again, that they are doing a mid-year, another increase, essentially making this year a 20% increase rather than a 10% increase. What that amounts to, so this is the cost per 1,000 gallons that we send to them. It's going up by about 50 cents a 1,000 gallons, from $2.80 some cents to $3.20 some cents. The total percentage of that cost is only a portion of what you see in your bill. So that additional 10%, when you actually do the math, it works out to be about a 2.5% increase to what it actually costs for us to provide, to utilize that service per customer. The end number is that it will cost the town about $40,000 more this year, about $8,000 a month, than we had budgeted in order to send our sewer water to be treated. The question that was put to the council is, do we want to pass on that increase right now? In the form of a 2.5% rate increase in our sewer bill, or do we want to wait until the end of the year? We've already planned on doing another 10% increase in that for next year because that's what we've been planning for the last 3 years. That would then need to be adjusted and go up a little bit to probably something like a 12.5% increase. The council pretty much uniformly wanted to shoulder the additional $40,000 this year. We seem to be tracking pretty well in our budget, so I think the idea is that we can handle that $40,000 increase this year and do just one increase as we had planned. It may have to be a little bit higher than we had planned, but it will be reflected in the 2025 rates for the sewer. I will tell you that we don't know where the rates are going to go. The costs for Kent County are very, very high. The expectation on my end is that they are not going to, these increases aren't going to stop. There are lots and lots of cost increases on their part. There is the need for a lot more capacity that hasn't been planned for effectively. I would not be surprised if we continue to see sewer rate increases for a while in order to get up to where we need to be with the county. So we know we are going to see a rate increase for next year. We now know that will, instead of 10% as we've originally been planning for, will likely be more like 12.5%. But don't expect it to end there, basically. So So those were the sort of the quicker items on the agenda for last night. We did have two larger items. One was the presentation of our 2022 audit. So to give you an idea on timeline, at the end of every year, December 31st, 2022, when it becomes January 1st of 2023, we move into a new fiscal year. The town's fiscal year runs the calendar year, so January 1st to December 31st. The state's fiscal year, and I believe the county fiscal year, they run July 1st through June 31st. Why we decided to use something different, I don't really know. The federal fiscal year, I think, runs October 1st through September 31st. So, or September 30th. They're timing-wise, those fiscal years aren't all lined up, but just so you know, the town's fiscal year is the calendar year. At the end of every calendar year, we need to close out our books and we conduct a financial audit of the town. This is something that the town pays for. It is something that we do privately every year, and it's required for bond ratings and grants and things like that. In 2022, or at the end of 2022, so beginning of 2023, we had major turnover and staffing issues, and our 2022 audit did not get started on time. In fact, it did not get started until the end of 2023. So we are significantly behind in this. It has just been finished. So we are a year and at least a year behind on conducting our 2022 audit. Typically, you want the audit to be done around June of the following year. So it should have been done around June of last year. And we're just finishing it now. So that said, we're behind, but the 2022 audit is done, and the 2023 audit is now starting with the hope that that will be completed by the end of 2024 so that we can be back on schedule to do the 2024 audit and have it done halfway through 2025 like we're supposed to. If this audit, we have to approve the audit. It's presented to us by our auditor. We did approve the audit, so it should be posted up on the town's website today. You can find it under the finance tabs, under audits. You can find all of the back audits that are all there. It is dense information. It is sort of hard to get through, but I'm going to give you the basics of what was presented to us last night. And if you want to put yourself to sleep for the rest of the summer, go ahead. Basically, we got... they talk through what the standards that they're going to use, generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards that are used for this. And then they look at all of our financial funds, they look at all of our policies and procedures, all of those things that relate to finances for the town to basically make sure that we are keeping our books the way that we ought to, and that we have in place the policies and the procedures in order to manage those effectively, to prevent loss, to prevent any sort of malfeasance and those kind of things. The town has really a couple of different areas. We have our general fund, which is most of the town operations. It's public safety. It is most of public works. It's all of the general operations. And then we have what we refer to our enterprise funds, but you can think of them as business funds. They almost operate a little bit separately. We have the water and sewer, and we have electric. We also have garbage. Garbage fits in there too. That's a little bit of an odd one. But so they look at all of those. They look at our business funds. They look at the general governmental funds, as they refer to it, which is what we would sort of call our operating funds. And they want to make sure that our expenses and our revenues line up and highlight wherever there are concerns. Every year they find something. It is their job to find something. One of the issues that we had in 2021 was that they found that we had something around $135,000 of deposits that we did not have the credits to match them up to. Basically, we had more money than was expected based on what was in our system. It's not a bad problem to have, but it means that they can't one-to-one absolutely everything. So what they did is they issued a qualified opinion on our governmental funds because of that. That problem was not addressed and fixed in 2022, so it is still in existence, and they again issued a qualified opinion because of that outstanding amount that we can't account for where it came from. There is a process by which you can go through and sort of reconcile that. The town staff has not managed to do that yet, but it is something that they are working on diligently, so that ideally when we do the 2024 audit, we no longer show those funds as unaccounted for, unallocated for. So they go through, it's actually a pretty lengthy document. They will identify, they work with the town staff, they ask lots of questions to them. They work very closely and they report on if there are any issues or concerns, if they can't get the information that they ask for. Generally, our town staff is pretty good. They work very closely with them. They're very responsive. It is a lot of work. We had 5 people working on this audit this year in order to get it done quickly. A lot of that is because we are massively understaffed and under capacity in our finance department. It's been that way for a little while, but it has gotten worse over the last few years, meaning we need to pay other people to do that work for us, which isn't a terribly great idea. But it is the situation that we find ourselves in right now. The general opinion was that our audit looks pretty good. There are areas where we can improve. There are pieces where they issue a thing. I'm trying to find it in the thing. They have a list. Hold on a second. Yeah. So what they call these the findings of the audit, and they have a few of them that are material weaknesses and significant deficiencies. Material weaknesses mean that it is something that is important, right? It's significant in the idea that it could have an impact on some of the numbers that we present. The material weaknesses that they identified, and there are 3 of them. One is the operating cash reconciliation, which I just mentioned. We have more cash that came in than we have things to credit it against, and that creates an issue because they're trying to figure out where that money, why did we get it, who paid us, and for what reason. Another one is, and this has been highlighted before, is we've been converting from Munis or from an old system to the Munis system for managing this. That process has taken a very, very long time. It has been very, very problematic, and that has created lots and lots of management issues and potentially places where problems can occur. And so they wanted to make sure that they highlighted that conversion process has created a lot of the issues and concerns that we've seen. And then the financial statement closure process, which is that at the end of every year, we are supposed to close our financial statements at a certain point in time. Some people, in my business, we set 30 days to do that because sometimes bills are still coming in, money's still coming in, everything needs to be accounted for. We have been through processes where those financial statements have not truly been closed for years after they've been done. And this is actually something that's not new. This has been mentioned that this has been going on for many, 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 many years, where we are not closing our books in a timely manner and moving on to the next year. It's something that's been highlighted before. It's also a problem that lots and lots of things, the state has this problem, the counties have this problem. It is generally a pretty common problem that municipalities have, but it's something that we should strive to fix, is making sure that those books get closed in a timely manner. You don't want people going back and making changes to the 2022 books in 2024, but until you truly close those books, that's possible. Then they identify what they call significant deficiencies. These are areas where they see issues. They don't impact the finance side of it, but they could. So one of them is our inventory tracking. Does our computer inventory system match up with our physical inventory? They've mentioned quarterly billing of property taxes. This is, instead of doing once a year, billing for property taxes, they would like to see us billing multiple times a year. It spreads out the demand, it spreads out the way that all of the money is coming in, and they like that idea. There's a few other ones on here: cost allocation accounting, pension tax plan withholding remittance, one-time vendor profiles, electronic municipal market access filings. These are all areas where we either didn't get it done on time. We use a system. So for one-time vendors, if we're going to buy a a widget from a company and we're only ever going to buy it once, sometimes they don't want to go in and set up an entire vendor profile in the system, and they use a one-time vendor, sort of like a catch-all vendor profile. It's not a great idea. But again, it's not all that uncommon, but we should strive not to do that. So it's more work on the staff's part, and you can imagine why things got a lot to do and not enough people to do it with, and so things like that fall through. So they went through all of those different items. They talked about the fact that a lot of these items are likely to show up again in our 2023 audit because many of these things were not addressed last year. They knew that, we know that, but we expect to see a lot of those things happen, come over again. So they went through the general findings of it, and then they walked through the actual financial statements a bit. I'm not going to go through all of those. You can certainly look at it. The major sort of sum up of it is that in 2022, and no surprise, there was a $2.4 million deficit in our operating funds. So where the taxes and all of the general operation costs, public safety, and that all falls into operating. We had about a $2.4 million deficit that we then filled with the roughly almost $3.5 million what would you call it? I don't call it profit. I'm forgetting the term. But our water, sewer, and electric funds generated more revenue. We shift that revenue over to cover that deficit. We already plan every one of these years to move up $1.5 million from water, sewer, and electric. But because of those material deficits in the operating account, we end up moving more money than we should in order to cover those. That is one of the major reasons why we had to do a tax increase this year, because we need to stop taking every penny out of water, sewer, and electric to cover our general operating needs of the town. We know that that's a problem. We're going to see it again in 2023. The first year that we shouldn't really see that will be 2024 because of the tax increases and the changes that we made. Something that is not included in that $2.4 million deficit is that also did not include the payments that we needed to make into our legacy pension system. That was an additional $1 million a year, and it did not include all of the major staffing cost increases that we saw in 2023 and then 2024. It's why our 2024 gap was looking to be much larger than that $2.4 million, where it's actually been sitting for a number of years. Right in that area has been the deficit for the operating fund. So basically no surprises from those of us who've been paying attention to it. The 2023 audit we expect to look very, very similar to the 2022 audit. And then ideally in the 2024 audit, which will be done middle of next year, we should see some substantial changes because of the work that is ongoing right now. So that was a lot of the meeting. And again, these will be posted up on the town website. The town manager said that they should be able to get them up there on there today. So if you don't see them today, look back in another day or so if you'd like to download all of it and read through all of it. And then the last item, and this is probably the one that spent the majority of time, was a discussion related to the zoning ordinance, a proposed zoning ordinance regarding marijuana establishments in the town of Smyrna. The Town Planning and Zoning Commission had issued their opinion, a staff report, and a draft ordinance for us to consider last night. I'm going to sum this up for folks from the state side. There are really 4 types of entities that the state has legalized for recreational marijuana. There are cultivation entities, so this is basically places where it's being grown. There are production entities. These are the places that are taking the flower and turning it into the things that people want to consume. So sometimes that's as simple as packaging, cleaning and packaging, or it could be as complex as turning it into gummies and cookies and butter and all sorts of other things that actually represent a huge amount of what this industry is now. There are then testing facilities, which kind of goes straightforward. Everything that's being packaged has to be tested on a regular basis. And then there are retail entities. This is where it is sold to customers. The town of Smyrna, the council has talked about this a couple of times in that we asked our Planning and Zoning Commission to draft regulations that allowed in certain zoning areas and with certain restrictions these entities to exist within the town of Smyrna. The zoning ordinance that was drafted and came back had what they decided to do was sort of follow relatively closely what is done for liquor stores in the town of Smyrna. To start off already with the production and the processing and the testing, the first three of those are cultivation, processing, and testing. The proposed ordinance was to allow those three types of uses in the IORP zones only. So that is our office research park zones. Really, there's two of those. There's the Duck Creek Business Campus, and there is the Town of Smyrna Business Park and the Walmart Distribution Center. There's those two spots in town that we have zoned like that. And that those would be the most appropriate places for the cultivation, processing, and testing entities. Then the proposed ordinance included for the retail entities that those would be allowed anywhere where we allow liquor stores. So that is in our highway commercial areas and our corridor commercial areas. There are concerns, certainly. We had a lot of people there who expressed concerns or had questions about this. The end result of it is that the town decided to table the ordinance for now because people need to do more research. Very few people have actually gone out to visit cultivation facilities or have gone out to see what retail facilities actually look like and how they operate. Which is concerning because we've been talking about this for a long time and people have not necessarily gone out and educated themselves as to what these businesses do and how they operate. But we wanted more time for people to go out and be able to learn more about this. The major concern on the cultivation and processing side of it is about odor. These facilities are basically very large greenhouses. They operate year-round. They use a lot of water. They use a lot of electricity, and they can produce significant odor, the smell of the growing marijuana. It is not the smell of the smoking marijuana that I think you would find if you walk around, anywhere at this point. It is a different odor, but it is still an odor, and some people can find that odor to be kind of offensive. Years ago, when this began in other states, they really didn't have great controls or processes around controlling that odor, and it has become an issue in some communities because it can smell. Now, we get people who call and complain when they spread manure on the fields around here, or when it is a warm and sort of humid morning and the town smells like the marsh. People complain about those things every single time they happen. So as in any agricultural process, there's the potential for, the wind is blowing the right way and you're going to smell something. There are, however, technologies that have been developed to help mitigate that as much as possible. And we want to make sure that whatever we do and whatever we approve, we want to be as cognizant of the potential issues and concerns coming from those types of uses and the potential impact on the neighbors around them. This is not something that is rocket science at this point. There's plenty of people who have figured this out and who are doing good work around it. It is also an evolving science in that new technologies come out all the time. We want to make sure that we are able to, if we are to approve these sort of uses, that we have the strongest protections in place to make sure that there is not the potential negative impact on our community. So there's work to be done around that. People need to go out and do a little bit more learning. Fortunately, there are multiple growing entities not far from here. There are multiple retail entities not far from here. It is not a high lift for council members or zoning folks or even community members to go out and actually go and visit these places and educate yourself as to what they truly look like. And then probably the one that has the largest concern is around the retail side of this, which is where does it actually get sold to customers? It's not an odor issue associated with that, but there are a lot of concerns that people have because this is unknown. And for many people, for most of their lifetime, marijuana has been illegal. I would note that marijuana was made illegal because of the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry and because of brash racism, because it was something that was predominantly being used or seen to be being used in the African American community. It had nothing to do with protecting the public. It was not done for the right reasons, and it's one of the reasons why it's being repealed. But because it is new, there are folks who have a concern about this. And the state dealt with a lot of these questions when they were debating the approval for this. There is broad public approval for recreational marijuana. It's about 2-to-1 from the survey that was done by the University of Delaware that people approve of the recreational marijuana should be legal and available in the state of Delaware. The majority of people in the state want this. So that's why the state legislature did it, and it's why it is being put in front of everyone else to consider how it will operate within the boundaries of a municipality. It's available. People can buy it already. You can buy synthetically derived stuff right down the street, down in downtown Smyrna right now, that is totally illegal and not regulated under anything we do. But a lot of folks haven't actually gone and seen what retail marijuana looks like. A lot of folks think that it's going to be, like we heard this last night, teenagers are going to be going out there. It's adult use. You have to be 21. The protections on that are pretty strong, just like they are with, you needing to provide identification, things like that. Doesn't mean that it's not going to slip through. The estimate from national numbers is this will take about 30% of the illegal market off. Recreational marijuana sold legally is expensive. It is taxed at a high rate, and the people who are buying marijuana to smoke it and are on a budget, I guess, are still going to be utilizing the black market for the vast majority of their purchases. The market that actually supports this and spends most of the money on it doesn't look like what most people think. I think it looks like it's going to be, like 20-some-year-old guys with dreadlocks and those things. In reality, it's moms and grandmoms. The major market are women between the ages of 28 and 55. The women who decide that instead of going home and having a glass of wine, they're going to eat a gummy. That is a huge portion of the market. And the other is retirees who, instead of drinking and the sort of known issues with overconsumption of alcohol, marijuana has now become the sort of, they call it California sober some places, where instead of drinking, people are utilizing marijuana and gummies and cookies and things like that because you don't have to smoke it, you barely even taste it, and it is providing the relief that people are looking for. I think that there's not a lot of understanding of who the actual consumers are from legalized recreational marijuana, and folks, we need to do better education so people can see that. We will have another meeting. This will be another topic of conversation. We have to act within some sort of speed, because if we don't do anything, then right now, the way our town code sits, any entity could apply for one of these, and this would just be specialty retail items, which are allowable in many different zoning areas. We don't have a restriction against it. Therefore, it would fall under the next best use, or the most similar use. So it would be, marijuana would be governed pretty much like liquor stores or cigarettes, in that where it would be allowed to be done. We have to create something. We either have to put a prohibition in place against it, we have to put some sort of a moratorium against it, or we have to create zoning that says, here is exactly how we want it to be allowed and governed in our town. We did not get to that last night because there's a lot of conversation and questions. We're going to be revisiting this again relatively quickly, because The state will begin issuing licenses for these likely in November. The licensing application period for the first portion of this actually opened August 1st. Anybody coming and wanting to open in the town of Smyrna will need a certificate of zoning compliance. So before anybody comes along, we want to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row. So you will hear more about this. I will be absolutely upfront. I support the zoning ordinance as it was written. I actually think there's a portion of this that I disagree with. They want to treat it more like liquor stores, which I understand. But you can, like I said, you can walk down the street and there's a huge joint in the window and a line of bongs in front of this place, and they sell all of the accoutrement, and they sell CBD plus, which is basically just highly concentrated cannabinoid that will get you just as high as everything else. If that is perfectly acceptable in our downtown, I don't know how we stand up and say that somebody can't operate a marijuana business in our downtown. But I do understand the idea of operating it more closely to liquor stores, and there aren't liquor stores allowed in the downtown. Now, functionally, we actually couldn't have one exist because there's distance requirements between how far you can have them, and because we have Reba's out there on the highway and we've got Spruance City over here, the circles in which they operate, that they have their sort of exclusive use, you could never even open a liquor store downtown anyway. But that is that's neither here nor there. So you'll hear more about this. I'd like to see the zoning regulations move forward. I think that it has the opportunity to bring, especially if they're cultivation and processing businesses into town that would utilize our water and our electric, which are ways that we generate additional revenue to help cover our capital needs. Those are things that I think are good for our community writ large. And it's here to stay, whether you like it or not. People are now legally able to purchase it and utilize it in their homes. It's not going to change. So I think we either fight it for forever and lose, or we make smart choices now and put in place some zoning regulations that we think at least can allow us to integrate this into our community as best as possible. So that's my feeling on it. You'll hear more. That was a lot of conversation, but that sums up pretty much everything we had. So our next council meeting is going to be on August 19th. I think we're supposed to have a workshop prior to that meeting. There's a big conversation items that should be part of that. A large piece of it, hopefully, is any sort of budget changes that our staff is proposing for the last third of the year. So we'll be having a lot more conversations about that. I got to run. Got to get my kids on the road. So thank you, everyone. Take care, and you'll hear from me in a couple weeks.